Chris's story, I, 21F, may have lost the love of my life, 20M. TLDR, I've made many mistakes that I know will hurt my soulmate if he finds out. How do I make this right? Long story. I've, 21F, had a crush on this man, 20M, since I was 11 years old. He played hockey with my younger brother, Steve, 20M, when they were both 10. Steve and I are Irish twins, 16 months apart. I used to worship those boys as they brought in their equipment. I'd open the door for them and wish them luck. Alan, my crush, would just nod his head and walk by. I'm actually glad he never looked at me. I would have looked ridiculous, lol. I was able to see him for a little more than a year as he played with my brother, but he then moved up in age group and all I could do was move on. I began getting flirty with boys after that. I made out with my brother's friends, with schoolmates and some boys in my neighborhood. I enjoyed feeling wanted, but it was really just young exploration. I wanted to be athletic, but I had pretty severe asthma. I tried figure skating but could never really practice hard enough. I was also stuck with an overachieving younger brother. He was too small to do much athletically. My whole family is 5 feet 5 inches tall, but he was a perpetual valedictorian. He was a parent's dream and I always felt insufficient for a biology teacher father and hospital administrator mother. I began rebelling when I was 13. I would fail at school, hang out with the potheads, and generally just do whatever made my parents angry. This all changed when I was traveling with my family to a soccer tournament. On the first day I was looking through the program and there he was. My crush, my soulmate, Alan was there. I knew that most of the teams were staying at the same hotel. I found a friend of mine, Sandy, she was 15 at the time and used to smoke with me, to walk the halls in hopes of running into him. We walked back and forth to the lobby checking out hotel wings, looking at wherever the boys were gathered. We had boys trying to talk to us, trying to get our attention, just acting like the idiots they are whenever we walked by. We didn't give them a second look. We were on a mission. Then there he was. He was walking straight toward us, head down as usual. I have to say that he looked beautiful to me. He had to have been 6 foot tall at that point. Long flowing brown hair. He was skinny but athletic, skinny not bony. We stopped in front of him and he looked at us with the most incredibly piercing blue eyes. My knees nearly buckled and I heard an audible squeak from Sandy. I said his name and asked him how he was doing. It hurt a bit but he clearly didn't recognize me. I offered him a drink and he said that he was going to the lobby to grab one. We joined him and first contact was complete. Sandy quickly made a graceful exit, leaving us to sit together and talk for hours. He was shy, awkward, geeky and clearly interested in me. Everything I dreamed he would be. He was so mature for his age. He walked me to my room and made sure I was safe. I felt butterflies when I got in the room. We had our first kiss and became a couple 2 weeks later. We lived about a 45-minute walk or 20-minute bike ride away from each other. We talked at least a couple of hours every night. I would ask questions, he would tell stories. He had a way to just create pictures in my mind with his stories. It was magical. High school was difficult for me. Alan and I didn't go to the same HS and the elite teams travel every second weekend. We would talk/text whenever he was gone, but it was just, well, restricted. Whenever Alan was home we would hang out together with his hockey friends. They were a pretty cool group of guys that treated me as one of them. These friends were inseparable because they truly spent almost all of their non-school time together, whether on a bus, in practice, at a hotel or during games. I always felt so special when I was with them because I was the only girlfriend that was part of the club. Alan also had another group of friends from his childhood. They would get together about one Friday a month to play board games or D&D depending on Alan's schedule. It bothered me a bit that this group never really cared whether or not I was participating or even there. I affectionately referred to them as the Pot Squad. The thing about the Pot Squad is that they were all my age or older. They were in the same grade as Alan and I, but he was at least a grade, sometimes 2 grades, ahead of everyone his age including his hockey friends. The Pot Squad started to get exciting when they started partying together. They discovered that it was more fun to play drinking games than board games. They started getting together to listen and play music, pool, darts, cards while drinking and smoking. This is when the group became exciting to me and I became interesting to them. Alan never really cared for drugs. He had uncles that dealt drugs and he actually grew up around pot all his life. He saw what it did and just never cared for it. All of these guys knew that and respected his choice to just stick to booze. I, on the other hand, loved it. I felt free when drinking and smoking. I felt more interesting as a person and I still had that rebellious streak knowing that my parents would hate this crew. There were a few times when Alan had to remove me from the party and sober me up before carrying my wasted ass back home. What I really never want Alan to know is that I used to attend these parties even when he was away. I remember feeling so guilty the first time I went without him. My parents were driving me nuts and I needed to get away. Before that night I would have my usual call with Alan around 9 to 10, then I would just hang in my bedroom listening to music, playing games, and chatting to friends on my phone. I knew where the party was because Alan loved when we partied at a house with a pool table. He told me how bummed he was when he couldn't go that night. I showed up at the house at about 10:30 and was met with the expected questions of where Alan was. I didn't have a clear answer, but the truth was that they all knew he was traveling that weekend. I realized this really quickly. I bitched about my parents and asked that they not let Alan know as he didn't need the stress. They agreed, but what was surprising is how little they changed their behavior around me. No one made any overt moves or extra flirty comments. If anything, I just heard a whole lot more stories of Alan's childhood and the trouble they used to get each other into. They would also talk very openly to me about how proud they were to have him as a friend. There were always some guys that didn't know Alan, and every once in a while someone would make a move, but that was always dealt with quickly and the dude would go away. I began to bring my friends sometimes. They had connections here and there, but nothing ever went too far. Sandy used a few of them as her playthings, but she was never meant for anything permanent. It was a really eclectic group of metalheads, skids, emos and geeks. All just getting together and having fun. Our graduation year was 2020. COVID screwed everything up, but it actually solidified Alan and I's relationship. We spent pretty much the entire lockdown together with each other's families. He'd come to my house and hang out with me and my family, or I'd go to his. My family adores him. He's exactly what my parents would want for me, absent maybe wealth. His dad and brothers are great, but I don't think that there's a woman in the world good enough for his mother to accept. It's fine, it's always really only been about him and me. When the world opened back up, Alan got to graduate. I didn't. I was a few credits short and needed to take one more semester. I chose to do this at Alan's HS rather than my own. I'm pretty sure my dad agreed in order to avoid the embarrassment of me not getting the job done at his school. Alan went off to chase his dream of playing pro hockey. While I supported him wholeheartedly, I also experienced severe depression for the first time in my life. I would get out of bed for 3 hours every day for school. I'd get up, get dressed for school, get there just in time, then come home right after and go back to bed. The only highlight of my day being when Alan called. I was a lonely mess. I didn't get better until my mom noticed and got me some medication. I don't think Alan ever knew how bad it was for me. I kept it to myself because he was struggling with minimal playing time. Once I felt better, I decided to pursue a career in nursing. Everyone loved the idea of me following in my mom's footsteps. I liked the idea of picking something to do while I waited for my man to find his success. I literally focused on two things: school and Alan for the next 2.5 years. Alan had a couple of major setbacks during this time. The first was when he got traded. The second was when he didn't get drafted. I was with him and supported him through both. He quit his pursuit of a hockey career a year ago and started university. I got my certificate and am now working in long-term care. I have my man back and it's been pretty intense. I'm pretty sure that we've broken his car seat. We backpacked, climbed mountains and lived in a tent every weekend this past summer. We're both still living with our parents, but we plan on moving in together in the new year. So now's the time to get to the gist of this post. I don't think I'm worthy of this man and I need to give him a chance to figure that out. Here's why. I never told him about my partying without him in HS. I'm also pretty sure that he doesn't know how much of a drug problem I had. I never told him about my severe depression. I honestly don't know if I would still be here had my mother not intervened. I have a social media presence that he doesn't know about. I'm on FB and IG. I've never posted anything but normal boring pictures of myself, my family and Alan. Maybe the odd meme here and there. What I'm embarrassed about is that I've also chatted with a few of his friends through DMs. There are a couple of the pot squad that have kept in touch since HS ended. I've kept the conversations to just talking about our fun times together. I haven't deleted anything, but I haven't told Alan because I'm worried that some of those discussions are about times when Alan wasn't there. The above turned into an absolute crapshow on Friday night. Alan got tickets to the university football game. He invited a couple of the pot squad to catch up, and of course it's two of the guys that I've been DMing with, Chad and Daryl. Daryl was driving, so he wasn't drinking and generally just there to watch the game. Chad though was on a mission to get drunk and relive the party days. I panicked, got a little drunk and tried to monopolize Chad's time and attention. I also did my best to monitor any conversation that Daryl and Alan were having. As we were leaving the game, I got a chance to talk with them both out of Alan's earshot. I asked them to not talk about times when I was wasted without Alan being there. Daryl nodded right away, but Chad just started laughing away. He nodded his head but had a stupid grin on his face. We got to the car, Daryl got in the driver's seat, Chad and I got in the back because Alan always takes the passenger seat due to his height. I didn't realize how FD up this was until it was too late. I should have insisted that Alan sit in the back with me. Instead, I ended up in a ride from hell. It started with Chad whipping down his pants and shoving his ass out the window. Normally this would have just been a dumbass 22-year-old mooning the world, but he'd whipped his pants down to his knees and he was staring straight at me when I saw his junk. I looked away and laughed so that Chad would be a bit embarrassed, but not so loud that Alan would get suspicious and look back at us. Chad pulled his pants back up but kept reaching at me playfully. I kept pushing him away. When we finally got to Chad's house, he kept trying to slip me a bag of something. I kept pushing it back to him until Alan finally told Chad to just get lost. He left with his baggie and I'm pretty sure Alan didn't see what he was trying to do. Alan walked me to my door as always. He gave me a kiss, told me to drink some water and get some sleep. I started bawling as soon as I walked in my room. WTF was I doing? I'm sacrificing myself to ensure that my BF doesn't know that I'm a depressed lying junkie. I woke up in the morning to his daily "good morning beautiful" text. I buried my face in my pillow and soaked it with tears. It was then that I resolved that I'm not worthy of this man. I love him so much, but I need to set him free. He deserves so much more than me. I did consider just telling him the truth, but honestly, the worst choice for him would be to forgive me. I spent the rest of the morning writing up my breakup speech. I feel like I had 4 or 5 heart attacks getting it all down on paper. I texted him that I'd call him when I got home after my shift and then went to work. It was on my way home when I got a call from an unknown number, and of course it was that FN dung beetle Chad. He started with an apology for showing me his sex sausage. According to him, it was a total accident. I just said that I didn't see much, kinda like a needle in a haystack. He laughed but moved quickly onto the baggie he was trying to hand me. He asked if I remembered doing the hard stuff on a night in 2019. I simply said, nope. He then went on to talk about me dancing in my underwear and rubbing my crotch against a guitar. He was laughing away while talking about it. He said that he and a couple of other friends had to wrap me up in a blanket and calm my ass down. It was then that I arrived at my house. I was struggling to think of any time that I did anything other than pot when Alan wasn't around. I did try a bit of the harder stuff a couple of times, but I had always made sure that Alan was around to keep me safe even though he was unaware of what I was up to. It was then that my house porch light came on and of course, there's Alan standing at my door looking straight at me. I looked at my sweaty palms and said, Chad, that never happened. Please don't ever call me again and F right off. I then hung up before he could respond. I tried to say it without showing emotion so Alan didn't react. The next hour was the most painful of my life. I asked for 3 months of no contact between us. Alan ultimately and angrily agreed. I'm sure he feels that I'm just looking for some fling before we settle down. That couldn't be further from the truth. He deserves so much more than the lying depressed junkie that he's with. If he can't move on in 3 months of no contact, I'll come clean to him with all of my FN stupid choices. My preference though is to just fade away. So my question to the fine people of relationship advice Reddit is, what can I do to help him move on in the least painful manner? I'm not going to just start a Tinder profile or go on a stupid date. Those actions would just cause him unnecessary pain. My goal is simply to see him find a worthy partner. I'm at a loss on how. Any reasonable ideas would be appreciated.